And we've been reading about, in the first couple of sections of this canto, about how 𝐒𝐍𝐈𝐑𝐈 has realized the great possibilities that lie ahead of humanity and the imperfection of the world as it is now. And this imperfection cannot satisfy him. He wants to do everything necessary. First of all, to liberate himself from the imperfection of humanity. And secondly, to bring down that higher world that he has glimpsed. It should become his home, our home, here on earth. So what we are reading first today is about his vision of the imperfection of the world as we know it. I'll just read a short passage and then we'll go back to the top of the page and look at each sentence in more detail. Here, even the highest rapture time can give is a mimicry of ungrasped beatitudes, a mutilated statue of ecstasy, a wounded happiness that cannot live, a brief felicity of mind or sense thrown by the world power to her body slave, or a simulacrum of enforced delight in the seraglios of ignorance. For all we have acquired soon loses worth, an old disvalued credit in time's bank, imperfection's cheque drawn on the inconscient. An inconsequence dogs every effort made, and chaos waits on every cosmos formed. In each success, a seed of failure lurks. He saw the doubtfulness of all things here, the incertitude of man's proud, confident thought, the transience of the achievements of his force. A thinking being in an unthinking world, an island in the sea of the unknown. He is a smallness trying to be great, an animal with some instincts of a god. His life, a story too common to be told. His deeds, a number summing up to naught. His consciousness, a torch lit to be quenched. His hope, a star above a cradle and grave. And yet, a greater destiny may be his. For the eternal Spirit is his truth. He can recreate himself and all around and fashion new the world in which he lives. He, ignorant, is the knower beyond time. He is the self above nature, above fate. So there's a much greater truth hidden behind the common appearances of our lives. Martin, will you read?
Here, even the highest rapture time can give is the mimicry of ungrasped beatitudes, the mutilated statue of ecstasy, a wounded happiness that cannot give, a brief felicity of mind or sense, drawn by the world power to her body slave, or a simulacrum of enforced delight in the seraglios of ignorance.
Here in our world, even the highest rapture that we might be given, or we might be allowed in the passage of time, the greatest possible delight that we could experience here in the world of time and matter. He says it's a mimicry, a caricature, a poor copy of ungrasped beatitudes, of kinds of bliss that we have never grasped, we never experienced, no. He says it's like a mutilated statue of ecstasy. Ecstasy is that high delight, but in our world, ecstasy is like one of those ancient Roman or Greek statues where the head is missing and the arms are missing and mutilated. It's not complete. It can never be complete. It's a wounded happiness, a happiness that has been mutilated, that has been damaged and will not be able to survive. That highest happiness that we can experience here is just a brief felicity, a happiness that lasts only for a little while. It's some happiness of the mind or the senses. That's the kind of happiness we often long for, no? It's the happiness of the body. He says it's like some little scrap of something that's thrown by the world power to her body slave. This world power who organizes and runs everything here. Every one of us is her plaything or her slave. And from time to time, she may just think of throwing us some little bit of delight. No? Or it may not even be that. It may be only a simulacrum of enforced delight in the seraglios of ignorance. The seraglio, it's actually a word, an Italian word, but it comes from Turkish, from saray. It's the harem, the part of the palace where all the king's concubines and wives live. And there they may seem to have a life of great luxury and enjoyment, but they have no free choice. Whatever delight they experience, it may be only a pretense of delight, a simulacrum, a copy, a fake. And the delight is enforced. It's not something spontaneous and delightful. They have to enjoy it, or pretend to enjoy it, in those seraglios of ignorance, this kind of protected prison that we human beings live in. Is it clear? Anybody would like to ask anything?
Felicity here means
happiness.
that when the moment of silence is a great felicity of the years, there's few moments of silence before the but felicity of centuries. There the felicity must be different.
Yeah, of course, all these words are in a way the same meaning. Beatitudes, it's a high form of happiness, no? Ecstasy, intense delight. Then he uses the word happiness and then the word felicity. Something that's felicitous, actually it fits perfectly, but maybe only for a moment. No? And then we've got delight, yeah? But only a simulacrum, a pretense, a copy, a fake delight. Ilso, will you read?
For all we have acquired soon loses words, and all is valued credit in times back. Imperfection, cheque, draw, and inconscient.
Yes. Everything that we've accumulated and won, think that are our achievements and our experiences. He says it soon loses its value. Because in time's bank, the money doesn't increase, it doesn't build up, it loses value. So I remember being very shocked about this when I had a savings account with the State Bank of India in Pondicherry. If you leave that account long enough without withdrawing any money, the bank takes all the money. You have nothing left. And they say, oh, it's an inoperative account. Yeah. So it's like that. So it's the same for us. We may think, oh, I've gained this or I've gained that. Becomes an old, disvalued credit. You thought you had some credit there, but no, it's lost its value in the course of time. And it's like a cheque. You write a cheque, but of course there has to be something there to back up the cheque. No? But if it's imperfection's cheque and the only bank is the inconscient, you can't expect to get much value out of it. Lady at the back, will you read?
An inconsequent dogs, every effort made, and chaos waits on every cosmos formed. In each success, a seed of failure lurks. You saw the doubtfulness of all things here, the incertitude of man's proud, confident thought, the transcendence of the achievements of his force.
Yes. An inconsequence dogs every effort made. Whatever we try to do or achieve, here in this world, it's as if there's always something that unexpected, something that's inconsequent, that couldn't be predicted. And that possibility of that unpredictableness is following everything that we do, just like a good dog follows at his master's heels. No? He's not supposed to run about, and he's supposed to be always just at his heel, like a shadow. No? So that's how we use this verb to dog. And inconsequence is following every effort that we make, like a faithful dog. Chaos, total confusion, waits on every cosmos formed. If we do manage for a little while to create some little world of harmony, it's just waiting to collapse into muddle again, into chaos. In each success, a seed of failure lurks. You think really, oh, I've done something, but already in that achievement, there's a seed of the failure hiding. It's going to blossom. He saw, this is Asvapati. Asvapati clearly sees the doubtfulness of all things here in our world. And the incertitude, the uncertainty and unpredictability of man's proud, confident thought. It's very amusing sometimes how people confidently predict that this or that will happen and it's bound to be like this. And we can just laugh at them because it's all completely uncertain and unpredictable. And the achievements of our human strength, our human force, is transient. It will very quickly fade. Karim.
A thinking being in an unthinking world, an island in the sea of the unknown. He is a smallness trying to be great, an animal with some instincts of a god. His life, a story too common to be told. His deeds, a number summing up to naught. His consciousness, a torch lit to be quenched. His hope, a star above a cradle and a grave.
Yes. So this is one of Sri Aurobindo's beautiful descriptions of our humanity, our individual humanity. Each of us is a thinking being. We live here in this world of material appearances, an unthinking world. In a way, each of us is an island. There is a poet who has written, "No man is an island." There's a sense in which we are all connected, but there's also a sense in which each of us is alone in living our lives. Each of us is an island in this sea of everything that's unknown and unfamiliar around us. Each of us is a smallness, something small. But that smallness is trying to grow and become greater than it is. That's one of the great characteristics of humanity, this attempt to become more than we are. A human being is an animal. We are animals in our body, but we're carrying within us some instincts of a divine being, because we're not only our body, we're also our soul. Within us we have a divine being, so the instincts of the soul express themselves even through the animal body. And though everybody is in a way unique, all of us are very much the same. Our lives are stories that are too common to be told. All very much the same. And yet, in a way, each individual story is fascinating, if we really go into them. His deeds, they just add up to nothing. The things that we do in our life, we may do good things, bad things, small things, great things. They cancel each other out. In the end, it looks as if they add up to nothing. The consciousness, it's like a torch, a light, which has been lit in each of us, some light of consciousness. But we're going to die, and then that lit light will be quenched, it will be put out. Our hope, it's one of the great characteristics of human beings. That, again, another poet says, hope springs eternal in the human breast. Even in the most desperate situation, people still manage to hope. But here he says, our hope is like a star, a guiding star, which is shining over a cradle, a baby, and a grave. Mother Huta told me that when she and Mother were reading Savitri and the passages, and this passage was to have an illustration. There is an illustration. She says she couldn't help weeping. She burst into tears at the thought of all those cradles and all those graves. And again a cradle, and it'll only lead to another grave. Mother had to comfort her. She was so moved and touched by this terrible succession. But above all these cradles and graves, there is a hope, a star.
Shraddhavan?
Yes.
I have a question about this passage.
Yes.
As far as I have understood it, as far as I understood, Sri Aurobindo is also saying there's a God in us.
Yes.
From the beginning.
Yes.
So if I go to line 158,
Yes.
there is a human being. I think his meaning, a thinking being, is the smallness trying, no, I don't take the good, is an animal with some instincts of God.
Yes.
And could I also say a thinking being is a God with some instincts of an animal?
Yes. Yes.
So that's so difficult.
That's our present stage of development, no? It's this mixture. The director of the London Zoo, I think in the 60s, he wrote quite a book that became very well known about evolution. He called us the naked ape. Here we are. Darwin has proved to us that we're all descended or related to primates, no? And yet there's something different about us. He was thinking as a zoologist, and why don't we have skin all over our body, fur all over our bodies like other animals? He had evolutionary explanations for all these differences. But Sri Aurobindo is constantly pointing out, all through the book in different places, that yes, we've got an animal body, we've inherited an animal body, but we're not only an animal body, we're also a thinking being, no? And of course animals seem to have feelings and emotions, we have them too, but there's also something different that makes us different from animals, and perhaps that's this urge for progress, for being something more and better than we are. No? That sense of a limitation to be overcome, something to be conquered.
Individual soul.
That comes from the pressure of the individual soul wanting to express itself through the body, life force and mind. That answers your question? So let's read the last paragraph, Sarojini, last sentence of this section.
And yet a greater destiny may be his, for the eternal spirit is his truth. He can recreate himself and all around. He fashioned new the world in which he lives. He ignorant is the knower beyond time. He is the self above nature, above fate.
Yes, so this is the full answer to Ton's question. No? The individual human being, he's all these limited things, a smallness, an animal, and so on. And yet, for each of us, there's the possibility of a greater destiny. Because the true truth of us is the eternal spirit. We wouldn't exist at all if the eternal spirit were not living in us, putting on our robe of ignorance. No. So a human being can recreate himself. We find this difficult to believe. We think that we are the way that we are, and we find it difficult to change it. No. But he says, because that eternal spirit is within you, you can really recreate yourself and become a completely different being. No? And you can recreate the world around you. You can change it and fashion new the world in which we live. Because this ignorant being, this with a mixture of knowledge and not knowledge, he, ignorance, actually is an expression of the one, the knower, the one who knows everything, who is beyond time and space and limitation. He, the individual being, is also the self, the one self, who is the ruler, master of nature, and especially beyond the determinisms of fate. Fate are the things that we think are fixed, that we can't change. No, that is bound to happen to us, usually disastrous things, but also good things. Fate, it's something decided beyond and outside us. But in fact, we carry within us a power which is above nature, which is the master of nature and the master of fate. And it's that self that Savitri has to become in order to be able to save Shraddhavan. That's what we have to become in order to become free of all the things that make us what we are, our limited selves. So this is what King Ashwapati sees about humanity. And having seen that, and seen that, having conceived that great hope and that will, that it must be possible, given all this secret knowledge, to bring down a greater world here into this material world. A greater world and greater beings and greater possibilities. So when his soul sees all that, then the next section tells what happens next. Edita, would you read?
His soul retired from all that he had done. Hushed was the futile din of human toil. Forsaken wheeled the circle of the day. In distance sang the crowded tram of life.
You could read the next line also.
The silence was his sole companion left.
Yes. So, just the single line here. Yes, so this is Ashwapati. No? He sees all this and realizes all this. And then his soul just draws back from everything that he's done and been and wished for in his life. So it's as if, I don't know whether you ever had an experience like this. Drawing very, very far back from the world around. When I was a child, it used to happen to me very often. That, as if I just stepped back and everything was going on outside. Hushed was the futile din of human toil. All this noise that human beings make and all the efforts that they make, it all becomes so distant and so silent. And time goes on, this circle of the days and nights and days and nights, but it no longer has any meaning. He has forsaken it. He's left it behind. In distance sank the crowded tramp of life. If you're in a noisy city, the sound of all the feet and the nowadays motors and all the noises of many, many people, that all seems very, very far away from him. The silence, that eternal silence with a capital S, was his sole companion left. He is all alone with himself and the silence. Tramp. Tramping is actually what soldiers do. They have their boots and they have to tramp regularly, and it takes some effort. It's a hard, tiring way of working. And there's, we call people who don't have a home, who have to move from one place to another, we can say, oh, he's a tramp. No, poor fellow, he doesn't have a roof over his head. He has to keep on the move. It suggests a lot of effort, this word, tramping. Sivan.
Passively wait of articles, figure in the infallible witness strength, taking the best cathedral of his toes, under his arches, being with infinity, and evermore revealed of invisible witness.
Yes. So this is again King Āsvapati. Now he's not moving in our world at all. He's all alone in this shrine, in this sacred place. This place that is sacred to the witness. Again, a witness with a capital W. The one who is observing, quietly observing everything that happens without participating or being affected by it. This is the ineffable witness, the supreme witness, who we can't say anything about him, but he is observing everything that happens, and nothing would happen if he were not upholding it with his gaze. So Āsvapati is in a sacred place that is sacred to that witness consciousness. It's something that spiritual seekers aspire for, the separation from the busy surface mind, to step back into that state of silent watchfulness, detached. So he, Āsvapati, it's as if he's pacing through a vast cathedral, one of those huge churches, an empty space. This is the cathedral of his thoughts. His mind is no longer small and cramped, it's become vast, high arches reaching up. He's pacing the vast cathedral of his thoughts under its arches, dim with infinity. Of course, in those Gothic cathedrals in Europe, we see the arches going up, and we can see where they're going up to, and they're holding up the roof, and there may be beautiful paintings. But these arches are going so high up that they're becoming misty and dim. He can't see where their tops are. Dim with infinity. beyond all limits. And it's as if in those heights he's aware of the heavenward brooding of invisible wings, as if there are birds there. We come across this word brooding. It's one of Sri Aurobindo's favorite words. It seems it comes so often in the poem, and it has a very, very interesting suggestion. It's really the mother bird. She sits on her brood, her eggs. She has to sit there to keep them warm until they're ready to hatch. And while she's doing that, particularly a hen, they seem to go into a kind of trance. While she's looking after the eggs, very often the mother hen, she won't drink, she won't eat. She seems to go into a kind of trance until she feels the little chicks tapping at the eggs, and then something is going to hatch. So we use this word in a psychological sense. In English, we say somebody is brooding. It means that he's not talking to anybody, he's not looking at anybody, he's deep indrawn within himself. And we can be sure that sooner or later something is going to come out. It may not always be very pleasant what comes out. He may be brooding over some angry thoughts or anything. But a broody person seems to be deeply absorbed in his thoughts, but then something is sure to hatch. So this whole complex of imagery is there in this word. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of these heavenward brooding. So the birds seem to be not so much rising up, but concentrating above and spreading their wings protectively, and something new is going to come out of that brooding. Lela. Yes.
Despite what you said about brooding, I have a question. Do I understand well that Pashupati is here on the earth and out of the earth?
Yes. Yes, he's withdrawn into his inner consciousness, but he's on the earth, and actually we will see that throughout the whole time he remains in contact with his body. It's a remarkable thing. Very often that doesn't happen. We go into a deep inner state and we lose awareness of the body. But I think if we look carefully, we'll see that he's always somehow in contact with the body. Only if sometimes it feels, it says, like a wandering shell. It's just, the body is just the outside part, and that's moving here and there, but the true part is inside. Or when he's with the mother in her heaven there, he looks down and he sees his body on the earth, and there's a connection between his consciousness and the body. So sorry, who's next? Lela.
Yeah. A call was on him from intangible heights, indifferent to the little outpost mind. He dwelt in the wideness of the eternal reign. His being now exceeded thinkable space. His bounded thought was neighbor to cosmic sight. A universal light was in his eyes. A golden flux flowed through heart and brain. A force came down into his mortal limbs. A current from eternal seas of bliss. He felt the invasion and the nameless joy.
Yes. So he's been summoned or invited. A call was on him from the intangible heights, those high levels of consciousness that are out of reach, untouchable. So now he's no longer at all interested by what's going on in the little outpost mind on the surface. No. He's living in the wideness of the Eternal's reign. This is his consciousness, the eternal, the infinite. He feels himself surrounded by all that. And even his own being now seems to have stretched out beyond thinkable space. It's interesting how far we can go in our thought. Have you ever tried that? See how far you can go. We can, in a way, we can reach the edge of the universe, thinkable space, but we can't take the rest of our body and the rest of our conscious along with it. But now it's as if his whole being is beyond thinkable space. And his thought has become absolutely boundless. It's become next door neighbor to cosmic sight, to a sight that embraces the whole universe. A universal light was in his eyes. A golden influx flowed through heart and brain. So he's still aware of the heart and brain, but there's this wonderful flow of golden light and force pouring through it. A force came down into his mortal limbs, right into the physical body. And that force which comes is a current, it's a flow from eternal seas of bliss. It brings intense delight with it. He felt this invasion of the force, this invasion of a nameless joy. These are Sri Aurobindo's own experiences, which he's recorded also in some of his sonnets. A golden light came down into my brain, he said. Rima.
Aware of his open, omnipotent source, alone by the omniscient ecstasy, the living center of the living universe, widened through his faith with their words, circumference, to join in his immense spiritual faith.
Yes. So this is now his choice. He's turning away from the world. He's allured and attracted by that omniscient ecstasy at the source of everything. He's aware of his own source, his own origin, which is hidden and impenetrable, but still he feels his connection with it. He feels like a living center of the illimitable. Can you feel it? Like being here, there's no limits all around. The little individual consciousness is a living in the embody, is a living center, but it's a living center of something that is illimitable. He's widened to equate with the world's circumference. The circumference is the limit of a circle, no? So the limit of his sense of himself is the same as the limit of the world. He turned to his immense spiritual fate.
Living center of illimitable is like more like a paradox.
Yes, it sounds paradoxical, because we think of a center. Of course, if we draw a circle, it's easy to fix the center. But what about a center and there's no limit?
There is a center. There is a center.
You could say that if there's no limit, the center can be anywhere. There can be many, 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 many centers. Each and every one of us, each and every soul can be a center of the illimitable. It's a paradoxical way for our materialist minds to think. But it seems to be a real experience. He speaks of it several times in the poem. This feeling of being, yes, a center of something which is illimitable. So then the next description is very interesting. It's as if he in his consciousness is taking off like a rocket. Will you read, Sebastian?
Abandoned on canvas of torn air. Right.
Yes, abandoned, yes.
Abandoned on canvas of torn air. Picture lost in far and fadeless creeks. The earth nature's summits sank below his feet. He climbed to meet the infinites more above. The immobile ocean silence saw him pass. An arrow leaping through eternity, suddenly shot from the tense bow of time, a ray returning to its parent sun.
This is another beautiful image, no? It's just like a rocket taking off from the earth. So his experience is that the earth just fades away behind him. As he's taking off, it's as if he's tearing apart some canvas scenery, but it's a canvas of torn air. And that whole picture of the earth is lost behind him in far and fading streaks. He passes the very highest levels of the earth nature. They sank below his feet. And he's climbing. We have seen now photographs, we've seen films of these rockets, huge things, impossibly taking off from Earth and going on climbing. No? He climbed to meet the infinite more above. And as he in his individual being takes off like that, like a rocket, there's a silence, that vast ocean silence of the immobile, of the unmoving, is watching him taking off, passing like that. He's like an arrow leaping through eternity, suddenly shot from the tense bow of time, as if time has let go this arrow so that it can return to its parent sun, a ray of the original light being attracted back to its source. We'll read just one more sentence. Amrita.
Opponent of the glory of destiny, conscience swung its dragon tail, lashing a slumberous infinite by its force into the deep obscurities of form. Death lay beneath him like a grave of sleep. One pointed to the immaculate delight, waiting for God that was splendid prey. He mounted, burning like a cone of fire.
So that's what he looks like. So he's taking off, but there's a resistance. There's something that resists that escape. There's an opponent of that glory of escape. The inconscient is resisting. And of course in the Vedas, that inconscient is imaged as a black dragon, the dragon of the dark foundations. So here it's swinging its tail. Something has happened, in resistance. It's lashing a slumberous infinite by its force into the deep obscurities of form. Very mysterious lines. And Asvapati can see those dark depths below him like a gate of sleep. But he's one-pointed to the immaculate delight, the perfect, stainless, pure delight. He's looking for something. He's questing for God as for a splendid prey. He mounted, burning like a cone of fire. Wonderful pictures. We'll stop there for today. If anyone wants to stay and read, we can start at the break on page 78 and read now to where we stopped.
Here, even the highest rapture time can give is a mimicry of ungrasped beatitudes, a mutilated statue of ecstasy, a wounded happiness that cannot live, a brief felicity of mind or sense thrown by the world power to her body slave, or a simulacrum of enforced delight in the seraglios of ignorance. For all we have acquired soon loses worth, an old disvalued credit in time's bank, imperfection's cheque drawn on the inconscient. An inconsequence dogs every effort made, and chaos waits on every cosmos formed. In each success a seed of failure lurks. He saw the doubtfulness of all things here, the incertitude of man's proud, confident thought, the transience of the achievements of his force. A thinking being in an unthinking world, an island in the sea of the unknown, He is a smallness trying to be great, an animal with some instincts of a god. His life a story too common to be told, his deeds a number summing up to naught, his consciousness a torch lit to be quenched, his hope a star above a cradle and grave. And yet a greater destiny may be his, for the eternal Spirit is his truth. He can recreate himself and all around, and fashion new the world in which he lives. He, ignorant, is the knower beyond time. He is the self above nature, above fate. His soul retired from all that he had done. Hushed was the futile din of human toil. Forsaken wheeled the circle of the days. In distance sank the crowded tramp of life. The silence was his sole companion left. Impassive he lived, immune from earthly hopes, a figure in the ineffable witness shrine, pacing the vast cathedral of his thoughts, under its arches dim with infinity, and heavenward brooding of invisible wings. A call was on him from intangible heights. Indifferent to the little outpost mind, he dwelt in the wideness of the Eternal's reign. His being now exceeded thinkable space. His boundless thought was neighbor to cosmic sight. A universal light was in his eyes. A golden influx flowed through heart and brain. A force came down into his mortal limbs, a current from eternal seas of bliss. He felt the invasion and the nameless joy, aware of his occult omnipotent source, allured by the omniscient ecstasy, a living center of the illimitable, widened to equate with the world's circumference. He turned to his immense spiritual fate. Abandoned on a canvas of torn air, a picture lost in far and fading streaks, the earth-nature's summits sank below his feet. He climbed to meet the infinite more above. The immobile's ocean silence saw him pass, an arrow leaping through eternity, suddenly shot from the tense bow of time, a ray returning to its parent sun. Opponent of that glory of escape, the black inconscient swung its dragon tail, lashing a slumberous infinite by its force into the deep obscurities of form. Death lay beneath him like a gate of sleep. One pointed to the immaculate delight, questing for God as for a splendid prey. He mounted burning like a cone of fire,